You're listening to Ernestly Speaking, the only weekly podcast that covers friends, foes, and anything that goes. And now, for your badass host, Ernest Owens. And we're back for a special edition of Ernestly Speaking with your host, Ernest Owens, myself. That was the smack heard around the world, okay? I just... It's so funny. First of all, let me just say this for all of my listeners. A lot of you all was like, if there's ever a special edition episode, these are the type of special edition episodes that requires its own episode because the situation is so hot that, this requires this, right? Like, I don't just do special editions just on every little thing that happens in the world, but this situation, okay, what took place on March 27th, okay, Sunday, March 27th, there was a major eruption in Hollywood that took place, okay, between two entertainers, world-renowned, and it will forever change the course of how we discuss the Oscars, award shows, violence, jokes, quote unquote, and everything else in between. I am talking about, of course, the situation that involved now Academy Award-winning actor Will Smith and legendary comedian Chris Rock. Okay, I was in Philadelphia with my husband. We was watching the 94th Academy Awards in the Philadelphia Film Society. Big ass screen. I was into it. We go to this Oscars party. Everyone knew I was getting glammed up. I was excited, right? To me, I just knew that the big shocker tonight was going to be who was going to win Best Actress, which was Jessica Chastain. Yay! And Coda won Best Picture. All of my predictions were succeeding. Ariana DeBose, Troy, everybody who I predicted was going to win won. Jane Campion won Best Director. It was fabulous. My predictions was going good. Everything was looking great. And as they began to announce Best Documentary Feature, which of course was the winner became Summer of Soul, Chris Rock was there to announce. But before he began to, go into talking about documentaries, he decides that he wants to make a joke about Jada Pinkett Smith. He basically says, hey Jada, see ya in G.I. Jane. To which there was an awkward, pause and delay and laughter. There was a confused laughter. People were trying to laugh, but they were confused. Will, laughed at the beginning, which I'll get to what I think about that laugh and what was going on and based on what he said later on, but let's just get into it. He, makes this laugh and you could automatically see that Jada's not looking too happy about it. And you could just see her expression. And I quickly pieced together why that joke was kind of cringy. So a lot of people don't understand. So let me just break down some of this. G.I. Jane was a film that was made in 1997 starring Demi Moore. She plays a combat soldier who has her hair cut off, she has a buzz cut haircut that was very strikingly bold at the time. Demi Moore is underrated, okay? She's an underrated actress. Y'all should go look at some of her other films. But, she took a risk in G.I. Jane. She cut her hair off. She's known for her long, luscious hair. But she, decided to get the haircut for this film, and she was very devout in the performance. So, Jada, as you all know, she's bald. But Jada did not choose to cut her hair off because she just wanted to make a fashion statement. She did so because she has alopecia, which is a autoimmune disease that causes hair loss, and it impacts disproportionately Black women. There are women like, Congresswoman Alana Presley, who has issues with her hair. She has alopecia, and she's been very open about that. Jada Pinkett Smith has been very open for a while since she announced her diagnosis in 2018, and she has done red carpet talks. She's talked about it on her social media. She's talked about her crown that she has there. She's been very open about her hair condition. And so for those people that's walking around here talking about maybe, Chris Rock didn't know. Fuck out of here. Chris Rock definitely knew. And then Chris Rock can't say he didn't know. Hollywood knows. The black Hollywood circles are very small. He has been following Will and Jada. He has made jokes about Jada in the past. During the 2009 Oscars, when he was there to host it, he threw a jab at Jada. I think about the fact about Will Smith not getting an Oscar nomination, concussion. He referenced that, made a joke about that nomination. I think it was the 2016 Oscars. But he's made a jab when he hosted it towards her. So he's made jokes in the past, and he also, I'm banking he knew, but he thought it was funny because he thought he could make the joke. And I will say this before I get into what happened. In Hollywood, what people got to know about award shows, and I've been to a couple award shows. I've been to the BET Awards. I've been to a regional Emmys award show. I've been to a couple of different shows. When comedians make jokes, a lot of times you're laughing to fill in the gap. Sometimes the jokes may not be as funny, but it's typically that there's supposed to be this sense of laughter. Even when people are being roasted, there's almost a sense that, you kind of take it, like we'll discuss when he accepts his Oscar later that evening. But you will sometimes be in a situation where it can be cringy, but you try to laugh it off, smile off, even though deep down inside you might be hurt. And so throughout that night, there was jokes being made at Will and Jada about their entanglements and other things. And I think to a certain degree, these jokes are hurtful. They can be shady or not, But the entanglements, I think they knew because they brought this out to the public. They knew there was going to be a running joke. But Jada Pinkett Smith's alopecia is, to me, a health condition. It's not something to mock or make fun of. I mean, to do so is ableist. To do so is to imply other things. And so if Jada did not have alopecia and Jada just had a low buzz cut, maybe that joke would have landed. Because at the end of the day, we're not talking about a health condition. We're not talking about something that can be changed, okay? So if he's talking about her haircut at, say, G.I. Jane, but she plans to grow her hair back, okay, joke's there. Joke lands, it's optional. But the fact that she cannot grow her hair back, and she has talked openly about the challenges of her disorder, her health issue, the talk about the insecurities that she has faced and building her confidence to adjust to this as a Black woman, right? There's a lot of things there. And so what could be read as one joke changes the same way that Donald Trump mocked, an actor who many people know for having a disease, for having Parkinson's disease. So it's interesting where we can, cherry pick who gets mocked and what's a joke, what's not a joke. We understand, making jokes about, people's disabilities, making, jokes about people's, health. There's a line there. And oftentimes, actors don't, or comedians don't act like they know that line until somebody draws that line for them and reminds them what that line is. And so it's very interesting because, I think of, someone like Matthew Fox, an actor who has a disorder, who is suffering from a crippling, disability. Trump mocked him. And it wasn't okay. It wasn't okay at all. And we see this happen where people say, oh, it's a joke, and we think it's okay. And I don't think so. I think there's a point in time where you have to take a step back and say, hey, enough's enough. And I've seen that happen too often with many actors. Michael J. Fox. Michael J. Fox, was the actor who was being disrespected by Trump during a Trump rally. And that was humiliating. And yeah, we don't like Trump, but regardless, when Trump made that joke, it was not funny. It was harmful, it was cruel, it was mean. And that's exactly what happened in this situation with Chris Rock. He made a joke about a Black woman who's dealing with alopecia, and it wasn't okay. So sometimes people do nervous laughing, okay? I know that as a Black person, as a Black man, right, I'm in situations where white people in real time will say things that are not okay. And when I was younger, I was in a position where sometimes you cannot express anger or outrage. When we think about Jane Campion and the remarks that she made to Serena and Venus, right? And she made that faulty, tone-deaf, racist-ass joke, quote unquote. If Venus and Serena would have reacted in the same way that Will did, well, not even just say slapping, but like if they would have showed any expression of anger, or they would have just said not funny, or just did something slightly different, the dynamic would have changed and it would have went on them. And so I've been in situations where I have encountered some really not funny jokes that were made by white people at my expense. And I said in that moment, you know what? I'm not going to emote or give feelings or emotions. So people in that room could say, oh, Ernest wasn't upset. He was okay with that joke, or he didn't express he was frustrated. But that didn't mean that I wasn't. The same way that Venus and Serena were there, they clapped and Jane Campion put her hand on her shoulder. Those are the optics that happen in certain spaces. And even when it's other black people saying certain things, right? That in that setting, Will was around a bunch of white people. Jada was there in the industry as predominantly white. They were amongst their peers. And so at some extent, Will was, as he often do, sometimes prioritize career over family life. Sometimes he will, say, Jada, just take it because this is what we got to do. But I think there was a moment where in real time, Will had enough. I think that Will felt like oftentimes his wife has to suck it up. That sometimes he has put his family in the crossroads. And I think he had a moment where he just was not okay with it. He was triggered. And I think he felt like, you know what? This is not okay. And he decided to go up on that stage. He slapped Chris Rock. And he got back off that stage. And he made it very clear that Chris Rock needs to keep his wife's fucking name out of his mouth. And he made sure he said it twice, so that everybody in that damn room could hear it. And there's something about that moment that's very important. I don't need to tell you all that I don't condone violence. I think focusing on this conversation as it's assault, it's violence, misses the entire point. Because it was a slap. And it was a slap that clearly was not severe enough for Chris Rock to call the police and press charges like some of you all insinuated. Or some of you all thinking, oh, the Academy Awards need to get involved, the security needs to pull him out. Will Smith was not an endangerment to anyone else. Will Smith was not going to harm anyone else. Will Smith was a man who decided that he wanted to stand up and defend his wife in the way that he saw fit. We could disagree about whether that, of course, was the right thing to do. But I think it represents something that we haven't seen in a long time in that type of way. There has always in Hollywood and in society has been this desire that black women are oftentimes insulted and disrespected. And oftentimes in these situations, we don't think about the repercussions and the perpetuation of what that means to the world stage. An award show like the Oscars, exhibits American views, ideals, values, whether it's super capitalism, wealth, racism, colorism, right? Body shaming and standards. But it's a perpetuation on the world stage about what are the things that are socially acceptable and what's not. Arguably in this country, people use award shows to push and project values about how they feel about society. Jessica Chastain's speech when she won Best Actress, she used that time to talk about the injustices against LGBTQI people and asked for a more compassionate country at a time where people were saying, don't say gay. That's an opportunity, right? A world stage where she's able to get that message across. Chris Rock used his platform where millions of people around the world was watching to disrespect a black woman, critique her hair, talk about her disease, talk about her disability, talk about her hair loss, and mock her in an industry that already mocks black women for their appearances every single day. And Chris Rock, a black man who ought to know better, a man who made a 2009 documentary called Good Hair, in which he's supposed to know better about women's appearances and hair and these things, right? Because he knows the impact of what it would have caused on his daughter, who asked the question about good hair back in those days. So in other words, Chris Rock knew better. And he knew the power of media and the perceptions and the images and the conversations. In that moment, decided to make a G.I. Jane joke mocking her hairstyle would have opened Jada Pinkett Smith to a barrage of insensitive jokes about her hair. It would have disrespected other black women who suffer from alopecia. And it would have given, in some sense, white people this license to feel entitled to be able to mock her or make jokes about hair conditions because Chris Brown, Freudian slip, Chris Rock did it. And so there's a message here that Will gets up and he decides enough's a fucking enough. I'm not going to let my wife in this moment be used as a joke. And I think the slap was more than just a joke, a slap at Chris. It was a slap to a lot of people in America who was laughing at that scream. It was a slap at the people in that room who laughed, including people like him who nervously did, to realize that, you know what, he had a moment to say, I can't tolerate this. Because where does it stop? If I let them disrespect my wife's health condition, if I let them disrespect black women and black hair and hair conditions, at what point does this stop? And does it end, right? And if it starts with Chris Rock, then it becomes another gate. Because let's not forget, Chris Rock is the same man who sat in a room, okay, with white actors like, J.K. and, not J.K. Rowling, but Louis C.K. and Jerry Seinfeld and, the other ones who was there. You're in this space and you're allowing, Ricky Gervais is in that room, right? And you're in this space with these white actors, these white comedians, and you're there and you're saying the N-word. And you're using the N-word around them, and you're poking the stereotype, and you're using that hard ER right on it, and you're feeling comfortable to be the black guy that's making white people in this space feel comfortable using the N-word. And you're using it, and you're referencing to them in this way, and you're taking something like this, and you're doing it. This is the kind of comedian Chris Rock is. He has definitely used black women constantly as the butt of his jokes. He has oftentimes, in a predominantly white space, have used experiences involving black people, whether it's the N-word or black women experiences, as the brunt of jokes to make predominantly white crowds laugh. And in the Oscars, we know Oscars so white, he was using a joke that clearly was to mock a black woman's appearance, to make a joke that allowed other white people who already in Hollywood carry, racial bias and other types of discriminatory ideals. He used that space to target and single her out in a way that was unfair, that was cruel, and not okay. And Will Smith in that moment knew that he had privilege, right? He had privilege as a man to get up and do what he do. We could call it toxic masculinity. We can call it aggression. We call it all those things. But in this situation, there's a bigger evil here. There's a bigger evil. Because we could keep on saying violence isn't the answer. But misogynoir isn't either. But ableism isn't either. But disrespecting black women isn't either. And so if you're more caught up in Will slapping than you are on what actually happened, that tells me personally what kind of person you are. It do. Because I think about all of the countless times I have seen LGBTQ youth be harassed, bullied, teased, taunted, and how many of them have considered suicide or other issues. I think about Chadwick Boseman, who some people will say suffered in silence, but he actually did suffer in silence. He dealt with cancer in privacy, because even when people did not know that this man was having a life-threatening illness that led to his death, people was making jokes and comments about his appearance. And to be quite honest, a comedian like Chris Rock, who clearly doesn't give a fuck or cannot read the room, would have thought that would have been game, even though this man was privately dying from cancer. We don't know the extent to what alopecia is doing to Jada, but Jada has been very frank and open about it in a way that's very vulnerable. And the fact that he would, cash in on her vulnerability for the expense of trying to make a predominantly white room laugh at her as a black woman, it required a level of a wake up. And so when I saw Will go up there, I didn't know what the hell was going on, because where we was at, we was like, whoa. But when I found out he slapped him and he told him to keep his wife's name out his mouth, it became clear to me that that was a moment for everybody in that situation to stop laughing. It was a moment for him and a sobering moment for everybody in that room to recognize that this is not okay. That at some point the circus has to stop. At some point, lines do get crossed. And everyone keeps asking, well, how does jokes cross the line? Well, that's how a joke crosses the line. When you begin to do stuff in malice. And I'm so sick of people referencing jokes. Everything is not always a joke, clearly. But some things, let's be honest, are weaponized and manipulate in a way to give off the suggestion that it's more than what it is, right? So we have been programmed as a people to assume that, oh, okay, I'm mad about this, or I could say this, but if I say it's a joke, that protects me. Jokes are not an insurance policy anymore for people's bigotry, sexism, transphobia, anti-Black womanness. None of this is okay. And I think that's the problem we have had as a society. I knew that one day something was going to pop because we're at a time, and this is why I love my book, The Case for Cancel Culture. It's coming out next year, y'all. Get ready. Because this is what I'm talking about when I talk about cancel culture and I talk about, free speech and these arguments about comedy, right? Because let me be clear with you. You all don't care about when jokes go too far. The transgender community, the LGBTQIA community collectively have suffered a lot from the type of disgusting, derogatory jokes that have been made by people like Kevin Hart and people like Dave Chappelle. And, they put out petitions and they protest. And you know what you all say? They're just jokes. Why are people too sensitive? They don't resort to violence. No one slapped Dave Chappelle. No one slapped Kevin Hart. But what's funny? Is that you all thought that was too far. That was too much. So now I hear you all talk about I hear about Will Smith slapping, Chris Rock. And now you all want to say, that's too far. That's too much. He shouldn't have did that. Well, you know what? Whether marginalized people defend themselves with nonviolence or violence, you all think it's too far. It was too far for trans people to boycott Netflix. It was too far for gay performers and entertainers to say that Kevin Hart was wrong. It's always too far for the marginalized or the disrespected to defend themselves in the name of jokes. And then the argument becomes free speech. So let's talk about free speech for 5 seconds, because I'm so tired of you all talking about free speech as if it's an insurance policy to protect your ass from getting called out. The First Amendment right on free speech protects you from government intervention when you are legally practicing free speech. Let me hold my spindrift real quick, because I don't drink beer. But hold my spindrift real quick. Government intervention means that the government will not sue you. The government will not arrest you or put you in jail for expressing yourself in a legal free speech way. So what I mean by that is, Chris Rock can make his joke and he's not going to go to jail. That's what the First Amendment and free speech means. What free speech does not control is public perception and the court of public opinion. So while you can express your views, other people can express their views too. And if they are contrary to your views, that is okay under the First Amendment, period. So what happens is we often see people make harmful jokes and people push back, clap back, and people say, you know what? That's not fair. They're doing too much. No. They're practicing their amendment. Just like a comedian can make an offensive joke that is disrespectful to a community, it's the same way that said community can make a response back and push back and disagree. For those who think that it is overkill or problematic that the community to which got the receiving joke is, jokes are subjective. Who gets to define what's funny, what's not funny? I always tell people that at the end of the day, it's about agency. If you make a joke about someone and that person does not think it's a joke, then automatically that's when the joke dies. Because at the end of the day, if that person does not think it's funny, how they feel about it in that space, if you're doing it in a public setting for them, then how they feel, they're entitled to feeling how they feel. You can't control how people receive a joke. Telling somebody it's just a joke is you trying to tell them how they should fucking feel. See how problematic that is? So it's like if a man goes up and slap a woman on the ass and say, I was just teasing, that's still violating that woman's space. That is still crossing the line. That is still sexual harassment. Oh, it's just jokes. Oh, I didn't mean anything by it. Intention does not override impact. Impact trumps intention. The impact and the consequences of what you do will always supersede what you intended to do. Which is why Chris Rock should be apologizing. Okay? And maybe if Will Smith decides to apologize because maybe he should have been physical, that's a choice. But the reason why he did what he did makes more sense to me than why Chris Rock thought it was okay to make the joke he made. How do you it makes more sense to me to see Will Smith stepping up and defending his wife. Maybe we can disagree on the tactic, but you know what? We're always disagreeing on how black people defend their family, defend themselves. So I don't want to get in the business of chastising another person about how they decide to stand up for themselves. Because are we joking or are we bullying? And the problem is that some of you all think that just because someone says it's a joke, that means that they're getting a pass. Absolute the fuck not. Because we've seen other people make jokes. And we see what jokes people choose to make versus others. It's easy for Chris Rock to single out a black woman who's bald in a room with a bunch of white women with long, flowy hair. Says a lot. And I think the reality is that I've thought about this too. The one bittersweet thing, the one bittersweet thing that I would say emotionally that has me, going, okay? And I think this is really important. The one thing that has me going the most emotionally is that the only bittersweet, not even bittersweet. Well, it was sweet to see that slap. What I will say is the one thing that I would say pissed me off the most about this entire situation is the fact that in real time, and I want to be very clear about this, in real time, Questlove, after this slap situation, Questlove went up to get his award and win his Oscar for Summer of Soul. This was Best Documentary Feature. Chris Rock was presenting Best Documentary Feature to the public. To me, that experience, that exchange, okay, between Will and Questlove giving a hug, it was a Philadelphia connection, right? All right, West Philadelphia stand up. I'm doing this podcast right now in my home studio in West Philadelphia. So, there's a Philly connection here. Will Smith went West Philly. I got a piece. I'm writing about it I'm writing about it. I'm going to be on TV talking about it. Like, I have thoughts about this, and I think people have to understand that. But, it's sad because we spend so much time on Twitter, normally so, naturally so, focused on that moment that it took literally the life out of Questlove's, that moment for Questlove. I mean, we were clapping, we were happy, but we were just so caught up in what the fuck just went down because it happened just right before he was announced to win that it just took a level of excitement. There was just, there was a feeling, there was a uncomfort there. And I was in that theater watching the Oscars, watching the screen. I was just like, oh, goodness. Twitter wasn't, Questlove won. I was so excited for Questlove. I couldn't even tweet. I don't even think I tweeted at that moment, oh my God, Questlove won, because we were so caught up in figuring out what the fuck was going on with Will and Jada and Chris. It was wild. It was wild. And it was sad because in that moment, you're just like, oh my goodness. But Questlove is an Academy Award winning winner now, alongside Will Smith. Philadelphia came home with 2 gold. Okay, we was 2-2, 2-0, where we did it. But it was so bittersweet that in that moment, we saw the best and worst of a Philly of experience. But that being said, outside of that, listen, fuck around and find out. And I just have to say that because I get so annoyed, and I gotta talk to black people here, my people, my community. I get it, right? That every time these moments happen, we fall into the respectabilities trap. We began to think about what white people think. Who gives a fuck what white people think? Because let me tell you something. White people have been showing their ass at award shows for years. Okay? They may not have slapped, but we have seen situations where Tommy Lee and, others and have gotten in fights at the MTV Awards and got into altercations. We done seen, let me just say this. Let me just say this, because I'm going to keep it sweet and cute. If you all, let me just walk with you all in your ignorance for 5 seconds on this topic around respectability politics. Some of you are like, oh my goodness, I can't believe Will Smith just sat there and they didn't take him out. What they gonna do? Take him out for what? Is he a threat and endangerment? Security should have came and escorted him out. You thought that was a good idea? Really? Check yourself. Okay, let's talk about it, because I saw some people on Twitter that have had some really bad ideas or some opinions on tipping and ideas about security and assault and, okay. Interesting. What was the suggestion? Police? Because let's be clear, Chris Rock is not working with the LAPD. He is not pressing charges against Will Smith. Like Diddy had said on the stage, this is going to probably be handled privately. Who knows? In 2 weeks or 3 weeks, they might have a red table talk. We never know. But to be very clear, what are y'all saying? What are y'all saying here? But I get that some people have this thought, and this is the argument that I've heard, which is a dumb argument in my opinion. I'm going to unpack why. The Oscars are often so white, and for black people to be on TV, and for this to be a historic moment in black history, and to see a black man fight another black man on TV, that sets the culture back. That sets us back. That makes us look bad. That's not that. Let me tell you something. If one incident on TV is going to set back black people, who is setting black people back from what? From who? You think that black people were just leap years ahead, and because Will Smith decided to slap Chris Rock on the stage was going to automatically cause this catastrophic shift to how white people think about black people? Why do we give a fuck about the white gays in 2022? Answer me that. Why are we still obsessed with how white people perceive us? Because guess what? White people don't give a fuck about how black people perceive them. I really want to say, well, what about the January 6th insurrection? Where throes of white people stormed the Capitol to unpin democracy. That's going to set the white community back. I wonder if Will Smith's slap is going to set the black community back like the insurrection set the white community back. I'll wait. Because we got to stop perpetuating this ignorance. We fall into white supremacy and anti-blackness when we keep acting like black people cannot have triggered reactions or responses, that black people cannot have human reactions. Let me tell you something. The Oscars set themselves back when they gave Mel Gibson an Oscar nomination, and they stood up and clapped for Roman Polanski's ass, and they sat up and continued to let Harvey Weinstein do what he do until the cops came rolling in. Fuck what any of them have to say about anything about decorum and respectability and manners. The most racist, violent people, okay? The most racist, violent people that have colonialized, exploited, and degraded generations of our people and others for centuries. Okay? You're talking about Holocaust. You're talking about slavery. You're talking about crusades in human history. You're talking about... Now, how dare you talk about violence is the answer when you're sitting on stolen land? How dare you? How dare you? How dare you talk about violence isn't the answer when we're in a senseless war? We've been in senseless wars. How dare you? How dare you? How dare you fix your mouth to talk about violence is not the answer when you have sat idly by and seen police get away with killing unarmed people, and you continue to give them more money? How dare you? It's the double standard for me. It's the hypocrisy for me. It's putting people in this generation in apartheid-like states, that state-sanctioned with state-sanctioned violence. And you're sitting up here talking about violence as an answer? Was violence the answer when sport fans were out here punching horses in the faces and tearing up property? Was violence the answer then? When is, it's just funny to me when people choose to act like public civility, when they choose. When black people get out of character, quote unquote, or don't have the decorum to which they desire, then all of a sudden they're made the example of, when you have had countless examples of white people showing their ass and being disrespectful. What the hell did we just experience for the past 4 years in the White House? And you want to talk about violence as an answer? But these were the same people talking about having civil political discourse when the other side was supporting the displacement and the violence and the discrimination of people. Let's be very clear. Discrimination is violence. Homosexuality being treated like this disease, like it's a disability, that's violence. Transphobia is violence. Bigotry is violence. Ableism is violence. When you discriminate people, that is an act of violence against a group of people. So where were you all when you all were claiming that people can express themselves and have different opinions? Exactly. So I'm not buying this is setting the black community back. No, Will Smith is not setting the black community back. If you think that Will Smith is setting the black community back, I need you to understand how race and history works in this country. I want you to understand how white supremacy works in this world. And I want you to understand why so much of what you think is setting us back is just one actor's decision to react in a moment will do something to whom? Who's setting us back? White people? You still care about white people? You still think white people play fair and acceptance and inclusion. You still think that white people collectively as an institution are just sitting around having a scorecard on deciding when and where they're going to advance black people and give them support and resources. If the Oscars decide not to have any more black and brown people because of Will Smith's decision, that's interesting because they could make the same decision for white people, or Mel Gibson when his anti-Semitism and his homophobia was justified and excused when he was given another Oscar nomination and got to show his ass up there. Yeah. Oh, okay. Did we forget that? Interesting. Fuck your double standards. Fuck your anti-blackness. Fuck it all. I don't have any words to say. I don't need a lecture. I hear people talking about, Will could have used this opportunity to educate, Chris Rock. He could have just sat there and you strategic calm folks. Listen, I get it. There's 1,000 ways Will Smith could have did it. But at some point, I feel like, no. Sometimes, on special occasions, you just got to put your foot down and say, enough's a fucking enough. And that's what Will Smith did. He just was like, you know what? I done been in this industry for over 30 years. He done built so much capital, have given people so much grace, has always been super forgiving, giving people all of the grace and understanding. And he snapped, because humans snap. We all have that moment where we snap. And that was a line too far. So, look, Chris Brown's face is okay. Chris Rock's face is okay. Freudian slip. Chris Rock's face is okay. Will Smith will be fine. Those two will go golfing a month from now. And it will be fine. Because let's not forget, there are a bunch of millionaires who get out of pocket and they get back in it. So, it's not the first world crisis we all think. Fuck Chris Rock for what he did. Will Smith be all right. And all the people that want to act like this is an opportunity to give hot takes on how black people should behave, don't be that white person. And for the black people that want to sit up and act like this is going to be a detriment to the community and our identity and set us back, please don't be that black person. And white people, sometimes in situations that involve other black people, stay out of black people's business. I understand it was at the Oscars and y'all was there and y'all was watching it, but this don't have anything to do with you all. This is an inner community thing. Chris Rock know where he fucked up at. You might not get it. You might think it's just a joke. I can see that, but this is not for you to weigh in that type of way. These are the situations where you just look and you go, interesting. Okay. Let me see what Black feminists thinks about this. Let me see what the community at large is saying. And I'm just going to listen and read from them. Because any white person that's going to weigh in on this may not understand the context of which this is not okay. Black women, black hair is a conversation. It is something that is different for us based on our marginalized experience. And there's just rules you just don't do. Growing up, you don't touch a black woman's hair. And you really don't make opinions about black women's hair. As a black man, I don't give opinions about black women's hair out loud. That's just a no-no. And so Chris Rock knew that was a no-no. He knew that was a no-no. He wrote the book on it because he talks about his daughter and good hair. And I don't think he would want anybody talking about his daughter's hair in front of a sea of white people in the industry. Before the world, on TV, social media, all of those things. Nah. Was it the best way to react? It's debatable. But was it justified? It sure was. And I will tell you all right now, if anybody was to disrespect my mother or disrespect any of my family members and mock them and the disability they might have, tease a family member that I have that has autism, or tease someone I know who has multiple sclerosis, or make a disrespectful, disgusting joke about a friend of mine who's HIV positive. If you was to do any of those things, yeah, I'm going to come up to you too. I don't know if I might slap you. I mean, maybe not. But you're going to get that work in real time. Because sometimes we have to remind people that some jokes are not okay. And sometimes we have to remind people that they need to stop. Because that's how people get in situations. When I think about, Toni Braxton's sister who just recently passed away, there was jokes made about her weight loss and assumptions made about her. That woman was battling cancer. It's not okay. So it was a slap made around the world. And as a Philadelphian, as a person who currently lives in West Philadelphia, Will Smith did what West Philly does. And it's a message that this man deserved a Philly special. And the message of all of this, in conclusion, is don't fuck around if you don't want to find out. That's all. Be well and be best. Ernestly Speaking is recorded in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and can be found on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. To stay up to date with the latest on the show, follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Mr. Ernest Owens. Use the hashtag Ernestly Speaking to tell me what you thought about this episode, and check out my website at ernestowens.com.